I'm Chris Vestal, and this is SLA Radio. The following is the audio from our Future Ready panel discussion. For more information about our events or volunteering with the chapter, visit our website at units.sla.org/chapter/CDC.
All right, our three panelists for tonight's Future Ready discussion are Dr. Sue Woodson. Sue is the Associate Director for Digital Collection at the Welch Medical Library at Johns Hopkins University. And she has worked in libraries for over 20 years, holding positions in reference, collection development, and technical services. An important element of her work has always involved serving as public services liaison to the IT system staff that support users' access to online resources. She worked on the teams that developed the Hopkins ERM, and more recently their new discovery tool, Catalyst. And at the Welch Library, she's in charge of shepherding the transition to an all-online library collection and overseeing the reduction of print holdings by 80%. She chairs the Region 2 National Network of Libraries of Medicine's Ad Hoc Committee on Print Collection, Retention, and Access. Her degree is in linguistic anthropology, and she did fieldwork in Liberia. Pamela Tripp-Melby has worked in World Bank Libraries since 1986, and since 2002 has held the position of Division Chief Information Services Division at the International Monetary Fund. She is responsible for managing the Joint Bank Fund Library, delivering library services to the World Bank and the IMF. She also manages the IMF Records Management Program and the IMF Archives. Prior to the World Bank, she worked in a small specialized library at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, focusing on sub-Saharan Africa economic development. She also served as the chair of the United Nations Interagency Working Group on Knowledge Sharing and Information Services from 2004 to 2010. Her MLS is from Columbia University, and she has been an SLA member since 1975.
Get my age away.
And finally, Laura Soto-Barra, who is an MLS from the University of Toronto, joined NPR in May 2005 as its senior librarian, managing music broadcast and reference libraries and a professional staff of 17. She's responsible for the production, licensing, cataloging, and archiving of the NPR transcripts and programs. She also oversees the music library, research and training of newsroom staff, and the use of library resources. At present, she oversees and coordinates the digitization of the audio and music collections. Laura has been a member of the Special Libraries Association News Division and the D.C. chapter, has been a speaker at SLA conferences, and a library management consultant in news libraries. Prior positions include work in Syracuse, New York, where she initiated, obtained corporate approval, and managed the digitization of two newspapers' microfilm collection, the Post Standard and the Herald Journal, ranging from 1860 to 2004, so it's quite a backfile. She coordinated efforts with vendors, the Newhouse Corporation, and external agencies in the community. Soto-Barra's roots are in Chile, where she grew up, received her first library degree, and began her career at the Chilean Bureau of Standards and the University of Chile's Mining and Chemical Engineering Library. So join me in welcoming our panelists for tonight. So I have a list of questions that I'm going to ask our esteemed colleagues to address for the evening, and I'll start with you, Pamela. So if tasked with building a new library today, what would you be thinking about?
Well, I'm actually not tasked with building a new library, but we may be tasked with renovating the one we have. So it's actually a very interesting question. And in thinking about a number of the questions, I came up with my list of C words. And for thinking about the space, it's really collaboration and community. Because I do believe, Sue and I were talking before the presentation started, and we were talking about the future of print collections. And I do think that in a new world going forward, my library, certainly as a specialized collection, will not just be a warehouse for print. We will probably still have print until everything we have is digitized, and I think that'll probably maybe a while. So we will still have print, but the space is really going to be about collaboration. It's going to be about creating a space for us to do outreach to the economists who we work with, help them understand how to use the materials that we've put on their desktops, give them a space to come down and meet together. I work in an international organization where people do spend cafe time. They do spend time over coffee. They spend time getting together and talking and working, and they like to have their offices for quiet, but we actually have an atrium in our building that has a cafe and has a coffee bar. And people are there with their papers spread out and working, and I would like the library to be that kind of a space. I don't know whether we'll actually have the coffee bar too, but if we do, that would be just fine too. If I can talk our food vendor into giving us one. But it's definitely going to be about collaboration and building community within the organization.
Great. Laura, you were talking about earlier about how you work on deadlines, and with information technology having sped up so significantly in the last few years, assuming that pace continues, how do you manage customer expectations?
Is that about the future?
I was tomorrow.
I was just thinking about that question that you asked, and I wouldn't build any library building ever. I'm just thinking about. Sorry,
Sure.
I can come back to that. I'm a special librarian. So for about 15 years, I have worked in libraries without books and without space. So in my perspective, you are the library. You are everything. And when you move, you go with the library wherever you go. So I've been thinking about this, about the future, about this session this week, although it's been a kind of rather interrupted week at NPR, as you may know. And actually, last Monday, by this time, everything changed at NPR, and I think change is the rule for the future, and I think that is what we have to prepare in general for change, and how do we deal with that? And being a library manager, I don't know how many managers do we have on the floor. Who is a manager? So I think the future is in your hands in the way that you can prepare your staff. I think this is nobody can see the future. And I'm thinking about this session, it should be a conversation and the beginning of a conversation in the association. If we want our profession to survive, I think we have to be very honest and very straightforward. I think I was the only one who voted for the name change at the SLA, because I think the name is something that is totally against us. And I see it every day here with my staff, with new staff at NPR, and I want to say, please come, new staff, please come to the sessions, the orientation, the library training. And people say, oh, we don't use the library. No, it's not a library, but it's a word. That is against us. So how do we name ourselves? And for me, that is a problem, and I would like to change that. The other thing in general about the future, I think as managers and as librarians, we have to face it with flexibility and with the idea that everything that we know now is going to change and it will continue to change. So how do we adapt ourselves to that? And how do we, how do we make ourselves able to be able to confront all the difficulties that come to you? Okay, you're not going to have budgets, so how do you do? What do you do with that? Formats. Actually, I wouldn't know how to answer any question about what the formats of the future or what happened with tablets or all that. I really don't know. I don't use them. I use databases, and all my staff use databases. So going back to the question, and this is just the beginning, hopefully we can talk about all these issues. Deadlines, the only thing that I manage is the expectation for my clients is, you know what, we have everything you need on deadline. All our staff work like, the deadlines could be 2 minutes, it could be 2 hours, it could be for tomorrow, but you need the librarian who really is on top of it, the librarian who knows the collection, who knows who we are, what we are. I think our library is unique well, there is only one NPR, there is only one broadcast library like ours. CNN is a little bit different than us. So we manage our clients' expectation by lots of training, lots of outreach, lots of creating networks and communities. This building is 7 floors. We have to try to go out all the way. We don't have a library space. We have one where we have the tapes and the CDs and the music collection. But we have the librarians on almost every floor. I'm on the 5th and the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd and 1st. Librarians everywhere you go. And what you see is just a cubicle, a station, with a few books. On the 3rd floor, there are more books. I don't think we have 100 books. But everything is the databases. And another thing that we have to continue to train ourselves. And we continue to train and learning about more what databases, what resources, etc. Anyway, sorry, I'm taking too long.
If I could jump in on the same thing, because, of course, at Welch we're doing something that sounds a lot like what you're talking about. Not the building. The library library isn't a building. Library is the collection and it's the services. But our public service librarians have faced that same question. What do you call yourself if you go out and people say we don't need the library? And they have, among themselves, decided to refer to the ones that go out into the various departments. They refer to themselves as informationists. And it sort of seems odd, and it sort of, especially outside of that community, people sort of go, "Oh, you're just librarians. Why are you trying to do this?" But you've explained it very well. I think is that if you go to people and say that's what you do, they don't get it. But what I've heard is that they say once I say I'm an informationist, then they go, "Oh, okay," and they describe themselves as informationists. One woman I heard. She says, I'm an informationist who works outside of a library building. I do this kind of work, but I'm outside of a building. I don't know that may or may not be the vocabulary you want, but I think you have to find some other kind of vocabulary for talking about it, because I think people are just not. They still have. I think as I always say, you can shake your fist at the sky, but it's still going to rain.
Yeah. I like that.
So that's what they're doing. But I agree with you. There are still lots of places that need the buildings. And I'm very grateful that the University of Maryland Health Sciences Library has recently built this really wonderful building that has lots of space for them to store a lot of things. But not every library needs a building. And you clearly don't.
In a place like this, space, real estate is so expensive, and they charge it to our budget. And we used to have on the 3rd floor a huge space with tons of magazines and books that nobody used. And we don't have that anymore. And they put all the digital news staff, about 30 people, in a space where we used to have cabinet with file clips and collections. So it's very expensive.
So do your staff work among the people that you find your customers? Yeah. And do they find that helps them to understand more about what they need and to be right there with them?
They are with them, with the users. They are listening to their conversation. They know what's going on. They can, usually in newsroom, the meetings are ad hoc right there, standing up, so they are part of that. And when they see you, they remember, oh, you can help me. But what we have done, and I think this is what we have to do more in the future, is that as librarians, we need to be really outgoing. I think traditionally we all went to library school because we really liked books and we wanted to be quiet with our collections. And I think now is the opposite. You have to have a woman or a man, hopefully more men in the profession, professionals who are outgoing and who like people. You need to like people. You need to go there. My favorite position would be to be a librarian who's roving among the users and just talking to them and asking them, what are you doing? Like in our newsroom, so-and-so is a reporter on health. So what are you doing today? What is your project? What story are you working on? Oh, but you know what? We have this database. I saw this. So I would love to have that job where I know everything that's going on certain topics, or as a generalist, and know all the databases and just put them in front of the person there. And I think in that way, they will remember when they are stuck on something. But we have done lots of that here, but it's difficult because our personalities are not for that. When you ask people, you really want you out there. No, that is taking you out of your comfort zone, and that is difficult, I find. So I think for the future, library schools, information faculties should really attract a different kind of personality, a different kind of professional who is open and wants to do all this work. And also that these schools instill in you the issue of flexibility and change, and that you have to be so moldable and changing with the circumstances.
Okay.
I agree. I couldn't have said it better.
You have to market yourself.
So what would happen if the major free content services convert to a hybrid fee-based model?
Yeah. I really don't know. I mean, that's just sort of... when you're talking about paying for Google?
Yeah. Could be. Right. Yeah, that's a major content provider for free.
Well, we now pay for luggage. So
and we have cable TV,
right.
which
Yes.
for the longest time was a free service. And
See, I think going forward, one of the other words I thought about in terms of just trying to think about the future is competition. Not even so much competition in terms of what we do, but competition among information providers. I mean, look at the problems in the publishing industry and what's considered publishing. What do people want to? What are people willing to pay for? And the assumptions that we make about what we're willing to pay for, what our clients have available free to them, what the value of what we provide for them in terms of paid content. And I think the competition among the sources that people have available for them for information is going to have a huge impact. I don't know what that impact is because I don't have a crystal ball. But I think competition, I was telling people here, I in the Sunday New York Times section, Bill Keller, who's the editor of the New York Times, had a terrific article in which scathing article about aggregators, about people who are aggregating free content. He really took on basically the Huffington Post, but who's aggregating free content and charging a lot of money for it. And now AOL has bought what? And he, of course, running a commercial enterprise, was really, I mean, he had lines in his article like, in Somalia, this is called piracy. It's like, whoa! But to me, that's it. I mean, I think the competition among providers of content is going, and what really constitutes content. I have a friend whose daughter writes a blog for the Huffington Post, and the father was saying, yeah, but she's not earning any money at it. You know, this is great, but not helping support her. And I think the whole business model for information, I mean, again, I don't have the answer to the question, but I think it's a good question to be thinking about. And I think a lot of our assumptions about what's free, what will help these companies make money. Google is apparently making money selling television advertising, which I never knew. I mean, they buy up bits of advertising time and they resell it, and they're making bundles of money on nothing to do with search. So I mean, they too are trying to figure this out. But I think it's the thing to keep our eye on, because I think how we'll be able to work will be in large part determined by the outcome of some of these competitive events. I mean, we license a lot of commercial content and spend a lot of money licensing it, and have a contentious relationship with vendors, and just like everybody else. And it dominates our life and our work. I mean, I think there are two personality characteristics that librarians need. One is this outreach, marketing, being out there with the users, and the other one is to be a good negotiator, because that's really going to be part of, I think, the future of what we have to do, is to know how to negotiate like a business person, because these are businesses, and they're trying to figure out their business model too. And so I don't know the answer, but I think competition is...
I also realized that, in my field, it sort of frightens me the thought that the major search service for my field, which is PubMed, would become a for fee. I can see it happening, but I'd like to think it wouldn't. So it's in some ways that in the academic world there is this sort of push in the other direction about let's make everything free. Only you can't, and that sort of poses another question. You could put everything in PubMed. In PubMed Central, so that all of the content is there, but somehow, somewhere along the line, people still have to pay mortgages.
I'm an immigrant. I'm not only a librarian, I'm also I'm a new citizen. I'm only been an American citizen for 2 years. And before that, I was a Canadian citizen. So I've lived I'm originally from Chile. So I have the experience of an immigrant in Canada and in this country. And believe me, here, you come to America, the land of the free, the land of opportunity, where everything is possible for you as an immigrant, but there are no resources to learn English the way that Canada has. I didn't know, I couldn't speak English when I came to Canada. I knew how to read English because I was an engineering librarian, so I could read but not speak. And the Ministry of Citizenship in Ontario provides free English lessons for you, provides free daycare for your children, and free education with everything. Well, it's Canada, right? It's a socialist country. So the role of libraries in this, if you want your news, we need, whether we want or not, we have immigrants, and our immigrants out here are Latinos. So what are the resources for those people? And I think, going to your question, it would be awful that Google started to charge, because Google is in all languages, or Wikipedia. Wikipedia is in all languages. And everybody uses that, whether we like it or not, whether they know how to evaluate sites or not, they use it. And I think those free services are the most important vehicle of democracy and of freedom. And we need more of that. And I'm not a public librarian. I don't know what that is in this country. That would be amazing that we could provide information to poor people and inform them. But I don't know if a book or a database is enough. How, we need to be advocates. We need to be, what is it that you said the other?
Negotiators.
Negotiators. I think as librarians we could negotiate much better with our boards, especially in city councils or the government, and help out. When I came here to North America, I understood that libraries are an instrument of democracy. And this is it. I think we forget, we are here in this country, and we forget about democracy and freedom of expression and all that. I come from Chile, and in Chile we went through a lot of things. We still don't have public libraries. In Chile, you have to have money to belong to an Instituto Cultural, cultural institute, and then you have the services. But here you already have it. And what I see in public libraries is that they're dying. And that is just awful. How is it possible that we have public libraries that are competing with the police or the firemen or the ambulance services? And those are the issues that we need to be also in the future activists. And I think the ALA has been doing something like that, but we need more of that. I think the future is just so enormous, and we need... what is it, the book that somebody said today, librarians, you should save the world? I forgot.
Oh, yes.
I wanted to read it, yeah. It would be just awful that everything is paid, because I think the majority of Americans don't have resources, and we need them informed. If you have followed the situation with the mayor in D.C., Mayor Gray, elections and all that corruption around him, if people knew had access to information, would they vote for those people? Well, they don't have access to anything.
I mean, in fact, what's interesting is following on what you said, is that the history of libraries in the United States and the Carnegie Public Libraries is, in fact, free public libraries for neighborhoods and for local governments. And actually, I mean, even in D.C., I mean, lately the public library system in the District of Columbia has done, I mean, Ginny Cooper has done an amazing job of building some new buildings, because they're also places for community and collaboration. They're places for kids to come after school, for people to come and look for help in how to find a job, to learn a language. I mean, they really are community centers as much as they are libraries. And I think when you have the big aggregators of information thinking about their business models, they're not thinking about the impact on the public libraries that are trying to offer this kind of community support and job search help and those kinds of things.
No, we're in special library land now, but I completely agree about public libraries. I mean, that is if you want to look at, some of the really fundamental parts of early American political thought, it was about. And there's a reason that the copyright's in the Constitution, is because it recognizes that you have to allow people to make some kind of living, but it also says, but there's a limit, and it has to be available for everyone. And if you don't have that for everyone, then you are you're dooming yourself to at best a dark citizenship, an ignorant citizenship, and probably a very unjust society. It's I don't like the idea of paying for it. I mean, it's funny, not that all of these things can be gamed, I suppose, in various ways. Although Google will say that we immediately figure it out and fix it again, but it does rankle.
Okay. As devices such as smartphones, iPads, e-readers become increasingly individualized, what does that do to things like the intranet, institutional websites?
I thought about this one a little bit, because this is where first of all, if devices are individualized and everyone wants everything personalized, they're still drawing on something. I mean, you're personalizing it out of your music out of iTunes, or your news alerts off the NPR website, or your whatever off some source material. And I think this could also I think that sometimes you have these kinds of sites that become simply a source for people to pull what they want. They may not go to home pages anymore and look at what's on the home page. They may set up their personalized sources, but it still means you need a repository. In a sense, what NPR has on their website is a repository of stories that their journalists have produced, whether you heard them on the radio or whether you get them on a podcast or whether you get them in some sort of an alert. They're out of that repository. So maybe they don't have a physical, you don't have a physical library, you have databases, but what you also have are the digital versions of the original content that NPR has created.
And you have an archive.
And you have an archive, exactly. I have an archive too. And so we have these repositories. And so to me, what some of these things that are maybe our go-to places now simply become the libraries. They become the repositories out of which people draw what they want to have and to personalize. And the other thing I thought about when I was thinking about that question is, what about serendipity? Mm-hmm. One of the things that people lament about not having physical collections anymore is that you don't browse, you don't walk the shelves, you don't go, look at that, I forgot about that, or that was right next to what I was actually looking for. And one of the beauty of going to a website and just kind of clicking around is that you can have that same serendipity experience, happening on something you didn't think you wanted, but in fact you find fascinating. So I think the danger of having your own personalized thing is you're going to personalize it to what you know you want, but you're not going to personalize it for what you might find that you don't necessarily know about. And so I wonder if we'll get to the point where there won't be these main sites or home pages or repositories that actually have a welcoming interface. I mean, you could have the repository that's just something where people go and pull out the bits and pieces that they want, but I wonder if it really is human nature to want to just kind of browse around, whether you're browsing around on a website or...
I think with the tablet, the Nook, for example, those devices...
Mary sitting there.
are really conducive to reading. After you invited me to be here, I've been asking my friends, about these devices, and most they say that they are totally hooked and they are reading like at times that they don't even, because everything is there. It's like having your library going around. And one of them, my friend, is a scientist, so he's always been very interested in the nuclear fission and nuclear reaction and blah blah. So he never read the news, and he would put NPR here and there or the paper in the morning. But in the Nook, he got hooked with Al Jazeera, their website. And it looks like Al Jazeera is just the fabulous thing. It's like he told me the NPR of video, of television. But this is not on television. And he was telling me how in the morning, the first thing he does is go to Al Jazeera or to all these individualized news alert systems that he gets here. And it's the last thing he does at night, reading everything, especially with the news now, what's going on. And I was thinking about this person. Of course, it's a person who has means to buy that thing, right? Again, that doesn't solve the problem of the masses of people who don't have those resources. But if we are thinking that these devices are really going to make you read more, and that I thought is so interesting. I never thought about that. What I do, I still don't have one. I still read the paper in the morning, and the first thing I do in the morning and at night is check my email, but not the news. But I think other people are doing that, and that's very interesting. I see many faces nodding. Probably that's what you do, right? Hooked on Al Jazeera, that's a new thing.
They had very good coverage of Egypt. They did.
They had tons of money. They had the media.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that's interesting to me is, which is a little bit more technical, but a lot of these are working off of these applications that you download, these little apps.
Right.
And there's some things that are very nice about it. I've got my little, I just have a little phone that does things, and so I have the New York Times on that. But actually, I also can read it on my computer because there's an app that goes onto one of my browsers that does that. So, and it's kind of like reading the New York Times. It gives you all the little stories come by. But what troubles me about that is that they're not using the web the way that it has really worked the best, the way that it's really that it was built to work. It was built to work on any platform, any computer. It can be a Linux machine, it can be a Macintosh, it can be whatever. And these applications, I can get them on my Droid, but you can't get them on your iPhone. You can get them on your
unless you're a hacker and you know how to do it.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct, because I think that's going to be a challenge in the very near future. Maybe not the future, but I think it's going to be a hurdle we're going to have to get over, because we've had this actually wonderful period where if you had internet capability, internet connection, you could get anything. And now this specialization, yes, they're very fancy and they can do all kinds of wonderful things, but they're very limiting. And we've started, in my organization, we have a fairly controlled technology environment. I mean, there are only certain devices you're allowed to use and get the internal information on, get access to the intranet, get your official email, things like that. And we're now running into, of course, people also have their personal iPhones. They want to have some of these things, but they want to start to get their official information or their news alerts that are coming through the commercial sources of information that we license. And now we're suddenly faced with, this only works on this app, this only works on that app, and some vendors have apps for this device but not others. And so it's fragmenting back to almost where we were. I mean, I think of also like with the e-books. I mean, you've got all these different platforms, all these different readers. It's like when videos started and you had VHS and Beta and which one was going to win. I mean, it's funny to see some of these things repeat themselves, but they are.
And we had, go back sort of ancient, there was Silver Platter, there was all these different kinds of databases, and you had to have the client on your machine in order to run it. And that was what was so liberating about having
the web.
Web. There was a graphical interface. You didn't have to know anything. It was, that was the cloud before there was a cloud. We just went out to to the vendor's site, and we used their resources there. So, probably at some point, one hopes that we will move forward, but it troubles me slightly. I hope we do. I hope we don't get stuck. I never have to pay to go to a web page. And I have to pay to use, or I would have to if I wanted to use some of these. I'm very cheap, and I've never bought any apps, but I've bought very few.
When I went to library school twice, once in Chile in Spanish and then in English in Canada. Not because I wanted to, I had to. And I remember in Chile, one of my first classes, it was the introduction to the history of the book, I think. So my professor was just coming from the United States because the library school was created in Chile with the UCLA programs and money from the Carnegie, etc. So he was a PhD from here, and he said that in one of his classes here in the United States, we're talking about many, many years ago, that a professor has said, in the future, you are going to enter to a library. So in his future, there was going to be a library, and the computers were going to be in your glasses. And that you would go into the library in the stacks, and I don't know how, but you say, I need, somewhere you are going to be saying, I need forestry books. But I need this specific tree, the disease on this tree, and you are going to go and, you are going to start seeing, like, the floor, shelf, and you will go, nice. You open it, and you could scan and see that. So, so I guess my story is just to see how difficult it is to predict that kind of thing. Because now it's been so many years, decades after that class, and, we don't have computerized glasses, lenses, but we have this tiny little
just take them off.
Have everything.
You take your glasses off.
And so now, how do we jump ahead 30 years with this? How could we know? I don't know. Do you have any ideas, opinions?
I think one of the things that happens, too, is that, which is sort of what you're talking about, is that people have this vision of what's going to happen, and you don't take into account the things that will come up in between.
You're right.
Is that
maybe we will get to the glasses.
Maybe. Well, I think we have those wristwatches now. I think if you wanted, you could probably get a wristwatch that you could, talk into like Dick Tracy. But when I first came to Baltimore, I came in 1997, and I had been working in Boston before that, and they had just gotten, in the Worcester Sears building, they had gotten a banner that worked on e-ink, and you could change what it said on the sign there. And I remember coming and being convinced that, in 5 years we were going to have this wonderful technology that we'd be able to just, read books very easily. I mean, it sounded, all they had to do was make the dots smaller, And so one of the issues is how long it takes to get something to market. But in the meantime, things came up like, oh yeah, there's color. I mean, and that's come up even since, because Kindle is that e-ink technology. But now we want to see things in color. And now we want the maps folded in. And we want to be able to, while we're reading, go and get the, look up words and do whatever else. So all those other things sort of come in the middle and sort of break up our this clear sight about what's going to happen. There's always, people are working on other things the whole time your thing is going forward.
That makes me think that one of the things that I was also, whenever I'm thinking about the future or trying to predict or say, well, why don't we do this? And exactly, you have this vision, this idea, is the law of unintended consequences. That you really don't know exactly. You're focused on this thing over here, but you don't know either what's going to come up in the meantime, or what the path you think you're on, where it's really going to lead you, or what other opportunities are going to come up that you need to be ready to seize. Because the things that you do don't always have the consequences you think they're going to, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Unintended consequences can be not so good, but they can also be very good. But you have to be ready to be open to the fact that you have this vision and it may not work out exactly the way you think, but it may work out differently and be even better. I mean, I'm an optimist, so I always think, it won't be exactly the way I hope, but it'll be better. But I think that in thinking about the future, it's being open to what might happen along the way while you're heading towards your vision will actually be probably more important than you think.
And knowing what your job is, knowing what the mission of the institution you're working in, what you're supposed to be doing, and seeing where whatever is going on out there in the future, how does that fit in with what you're doing? Sometimes things are going on that are very interesting, but they really don't have anything to do with what I'm doing. It would be fun, but not really relevant.
We don't know, obviously, the unknown. And because also I got this presentation that I really like, Closing the Capacity Gap in E-Leadership. Because, what this professor in Annenberg School of Communication says is that there is something missing. There is a gap in skills. There is a gap in attitudes, in capacities. So, for example, when you have CEOs and VPs and, where is it? I didn't know if we were going to be talking about this, but number 13. Usually in traditional organizations, in any organization, you have the executive, and you have middle managers, and then everybody else. So what they say, the people who really work, right, make it happen. There is a gap of abilities and attitudes between the CEO and the CEO VPs and management. And there are skills. So we don't have people who really make it happen with the new things. And what he said, if you remember the formula, SAKE, S-A-K-E, S-A-K-E, SAKE, which is also the drink in Japan. So he says that skills, well, the S is for skills, but the skill of communications, capacity of interact, the two-way interaction, the negotiation, the outreach, etc. The A is for attitude, because that is something else. And this is important, I think, for in our field, is the intellectual curiosity, high tolerance for ambiguity, empathy, passion, tenacity in face of failure. That is just so important. and knowledge. Not only that you know the stuff, but the ability to master the theory and the practical, to know the concept. And especially I think it's important in libraries because we are dealing with kind of analog things with print and the digital and the other thing. So I think in order to understand the digital, we need to have all the stuff like the traditional library thing. Like you need to know how to catalog in order to digitize and organize digital content, for example. I believe that. So knowledge. And E is for experience. But experience meaning engagement in the organization, in the profession, and in society. It's not enough to have experience in libraries. Oh, I worked in library for 20 years. No. You really have to become an active member of your community, of your organization, and of your profession. And I think that's why the associations, the library associations, are so important. But we need to find ways that our associations really represent this kind of things, because so far associations have not been effective. I'm sorry. I know you are the president. You are part of this. This is a forum for associations. But I am an association person. All my life, I've always paid my dues from, the 80s. But many times, I don't go to the conference because I don't learn anything. I know I see you and I have drinks with you and I go for dinner. I know the vendors. But what am I learning? And I don't know. I think this kind of conversation is good. What do we know about the future? We can extrapolate. We don't have answers. But I think this kind of conversations are amazing, and hopefully they will get us somewhere to be ready for the future. And the other, just to finish this point, if we are able to get this, and by the way, this professor is Ernest J. Wilson III, is the Dean of the Annenberg School for Communication, USC, closing the capacity gap in e-leadership. I heard him speak about 2 years ago, and since then I've had that in mind. And when I hire a librarian, I'm looking for the A, because it's the attitude what really is just so important. And sometimes you have someone with just everything you would like, but you try to, it's a square peg, but you really have a round hole. It's because something is missing. And that as for managers, it's just very difficult. So how do we get to that point where we're able to close that gap? And I think that is what is something that, how do we get there? There is something, that emptiness there.
One last question from me. What does the future hold for privacy, copyright, authorship, and information ethics?
In 25 words or less.
Yeah, right.
Choose one.
Well, in terms of privacy, it's beginning to mean something very different than it did when I was growing up. But I think it's also true that we went through a period of time where, to me, it seems like there was a period of time in the 80s where there was a real intensification of issues of privacy. Maybe it's in the medical world I'm living in now, but that I just spent the afternoon with my niece, who was just about to graduate from college, and there's just a very different kind of feeling about who knows what about her. And it just makes me feel very old. And very, cautious and not trusting the corporate giants. But I don't think that I think technology has taken away a lot of what we have in the past thought of as privacy. And I think that if we really are going to, then I think it's time to think about what is it that I want to be private and why do I want it to be private. Because if I use my phone to help me figure out how to get to someplace, then I've left a trail of where was I and when was I there. And so all these devices do tell all kinds of stories about you. And a lot of it you don't even realize you're telling. And do I really care? I don't know. But I do think that it's worth thinking more about what is it that I want to keep private.
I almost think that there may be a backlash against. I mean, there's the Facebook ethos of sharing everything, and I have daughters in their 20s, and there was a period of time where every breath one of them took was posted as a status. First of all, who cares? And second of all, do you really want them to know? I think it's the dark side of community. I think there's a building of community, but this is the dark side. It's too much community. It's like living in a very, very small town where people know
I grew up in
more about you
that's what I don't like about
than you want them to know. But this is voluntary. People are putting it out there. So I think there may be a backlash. I mean, I think that and maybe I think of it as maturity, and maybe some people never mature, but I think there is the reason it makes you feel old is that as you mature you think, maybe I don't want them to know so much. But I think it's as if all of a sudden there's all of these possibilities for community, and people are out there looking for people like them, and they're sharing everything, trying to find their community. And again, I think there's a dark side to it, and I think as young people, I think, are, for instance, starting to learn how much they post, their employers are going to find this out as well as their friends, and that they're thinking twice about what's available for people to find, and that, if you Google their name, all those pictures from college are going to come up as well as, your resume. So I think it's going to evolve, is what I mean. I think it's easy for us to look at this point in time and go, horrors, but I think it will have an impact, and I think it will evolve, and the beauty of the community part is that people can find other people who are interested in what they're interested in, whether it's a rare disease or a hobby or whatever, or something, facts they never thought they'd be able to find, but
so that's the voluntary side. There's the involuntary side,
right,
though, that I,
you're leading a trail.
When I use Gmail, and I have for a long time now, in internet years, and I get these ads that come up on the side.
It's astonishing
and a little weird. I mean, sometimes I keep getting this one for baldness cures. Baldness cures. They quit doing it, but I got more than one. But
one for the belly.
Yeah. And I have a Facebook presence that my niece and nephews brought me into, so that I can see their pictures and they can tell me what's going on, and have sort of accumulated other friends along the way, and Clara, and it is a little troubling to me to see what comes up on the side. How do they know that person might be? How are they picking up on who might be?
Well, that's generational. We're baby boomers. But born digital people, they don't know privacy. They don't care. They just want to share everything. And more people our age are getting into that. I was just saying hello to a friend, and I said, "How are you? And how's your son doing?" Because his son is is a cadet in the Marines.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I don't think he's doing very well because I read in his Facebook page that he broke up with his girlfriend." I was like, what is that? And lots of people, colleagues, and perhaps you do it because it's part of your life. Now I said, oh my gosh, so-and-so, I saw it in Facebook that they moved, or they are look at the babies, they have the baby, so-and-so had the baby, look at the pictures. So it looks like it's a public album, and their life is open. But I think that we are going to have more of that, because more and more young people, they don't have the boundaries and the limits that we had, that we grew up with. And I think perhaps it's going to be there a few generations, and then it could be all over back again. I don't know. Copyright, I really wouldn't know what to do, but information ethics, I think that everything that is ethical now, it won't be in the future. It's just, you think so too? It's just totally everything is going to change. Everything is going to be upside down, and we will be looked up like the past. Look what they did. Oh my gosh, they didn't want to. Even myself, I tried to be open, and I tried to really understand this. I still don't have a Gmail account because I think everything there belongs to Google. We had the Google rep here that is in D.C., and we got him here to this room with the whole boardroom open. We had 150 people attending this conference. Google for journalists. And this is marketing. So, of course, our lawyers immediately were here.
First row.
And this man was saying, oh, you journalists, reporters, you use the Google Docs. So the lawyer said, excuse me, is that information belong to us, to the user, or to Google? Can it be subpoenaed? He said, oh, yes, it's in Google. But what about emails? It's Google. They have access to that. But we care about that. Youngest generations aren't.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, when I was saying I have to think about what it is I care about my privacy, that's an example because I have different email accounts for different things.
Yeah.
So I've got the Yahoo account for if I go someplace and I want to buy something and they won't sell it to me unless I give them my email account. So there's the Yahoo account that I never look at, and I have no idea what's in there. I have my work account where I try to keep just work stuff, although other things float in. Gmail is kind of like all the rest, and I have recently now made a Hotmail account that I use for external committee work, so that it doesn't get mingled with my own. But then I want to see it all the time, so I have it forwarded anyway. But the point is, the family stuff, I don't really care. There's nothing in there that I would care about whether or not they had. Now, but my work stuff, I don't want there. I'm very careful about not putting that there.
How can you remember all that?
Yeah. I used to do that, and it was just, my life was too complicated, and I couldn't. I think that the whole copyright question is fascinating. If I had a crystal ball, it would be great, but I think that comes back to my thinking about competition and what's paid content, and, is everything going to be paid, and therefore everything is going to be under somebody's ownership and therefore copyright? What will remain free and therefore presumably copyrighted but not, it could be copyrighted but not paid. I work for an organization that sells the data that it produces and puts together. Our sister organization, the World Bank, has just decided to give theirs away. And everybody's kind of looking at us going, and so? And we're going, well, and so there's a huge internal debate about what to do about this. Basically, we do cost recovery. We're trying to cover the cost of producing it, and, of course, when we used to sell it in print, for the print, but so we're a vendor, really. And I'm going to our external affairs people. You are the vendors what is it worth? Are we, as a public sector institution, should we be selling what we produce? Should we be giving it away? Is it a public good? So we're wrestling with a lot of these questions. But for instance, you can copyright something that you don't charge for. There's the Creative Commons licenses, or you can say, we produce this, we own it, we're going to share it, but these are the rules by which we want you to use it. So, I wish I knew what was going to happen. But I think it's going to be a very animated discussion, because I think it plays into this whole, what should be free? How are people going to make a living? How are content producers whose intellectual property it is that's been produced, how are they going to make a living at it? How are journalists going to make a living? And they're producing original content. And if nobody's making a living at any of this, why will they bother? I mean, I think it all comes around to those questions. And I think it's for that reason, I don't think it's going, if I had to look in my crystal ball, I would say there has to be something that grants people the right to the content that they've produced, even if they don't sell it.
And they have that right. They have that constitutional right. I guess my concern is, but the right has some reasonable amount of time that you have that right. And the question is, what's reasonable? And my sense is now that reasonable is however long Mickey Mouse lives. That every time the Mickey Mouse copyright looks like it's going to come up, it gets extended.
Yeah.
And so we're circling back to, do the corporate interests determine how the public good works? I
have to remember that. How long?
But it's true. I say, let's just give Disney Mickey Mouse. They can have the copyright on Mickey Mouse forever. And then the rest of us go back to sort of more what we were supposed to be doing with copyright. I don't know if that's an unreasonable way to give up. But it is something that's something that worries me a lot, is that it's a complete violation of what the original intention was behind that kind of and not just the original intention, because in some case I don't really care what people originally thought, but what it should be doing right now is it should be supporting people, like you say, you have to make a living, and this is my product. If I'm a writer, this is how I make my living. I need to be able to if I'm going to produce these interesting ideas, this good writing, this good reporting, I need to be able to make money off of it. But the world needs to be able to, at some point, receive that and receive it in an unrestricted fashion. And that's what people were saying in the 18th century, and it's still true. That if we're going to live in a democracy, in a society where ideas grow, you can't hold on to them and sell them forever. You have to have a reasonable amount of time, and I think we've gone past reasonable. I don't think I'm alone in that. His hands in the that's what worries me about copyright, is that, and it becomes people begin to talk about intellectual property rights as if they were mineral rights, or as something very different. Intellectual property rights are a very different kind of. You're not buying a house.
Is the concept of intellectual property only a concept from this side of the world? Do we know?
It was actually one of the earliest ones. One of the ones I know that's very early was Queen Anne, and it wasn't necessarily in her case. I think it was a fight between. I don't think she was doing it to be nice, but it was a fight between the publishers and wanting to have control over. The state having control over what was being said. But by the time it got to the American Constitution, it was by then it had. It was the Enlightenment, and that was what people were really interested in, was creating new knowledge, sharing it across as many people as possible, and so that was the compromise. That's why it exists in there, and I think
the production of the French encyclopedia was also
there. You go, huge,
argument in France prior to the Revolution.
Yeah,
because it was an Enlightenment, it was an aggregation
The early Huffington Post.
Yeah. Yeah. So it really was about sharing, not owning. The society didn't grow if it were if it were too tightly owned for too long. Yeah, that you had to. Pastor's phrase is that knowledge is the torch that illuminates humanity, or something. It's on like a. It's on a vendor's poster. I can see it now. You can see it at the Thomson Reuters or something like that. Because underneath it, I've put on a little addition that says
Thomson Reuters.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
We charge a small fee for access.
A lot of what you all said tonight adds together the concept that there's an information life cycle, from data to information to knowledge. And you were talking about information as and there are a lot of people in my world that are working on the data level. And then there, proposed change of name was strategic knowledge professionals. The question is whether or not we as a profession are willing to camp out in that knowledge realm instead of choose to be, library, which is broker and aggregator and service provider, but not really people that take data, make it information, and help our users make that information components they can use.
So where do you work?
The U.S. Geological Survey.
Okay. And that's part of what you do is?
We have a lot of data. We have hundreds of years of data that our researchers turn into information that the world then turns into knowledge about the world around us.
Yeah. And then
but
some turn around and sell it.
Our data is cumulative, which means unlike the medical world, which is if it's 5 years old, it's worthless.
Yeah.
If it's 100 years old, it may actually be really cool.
Yeah. We were having a discussion earlier before the session started, and she was talking about the fact that she's charged with shrinking her print collection. And I said, well, I always envisioned that at my organization we might end up with a print collection that's, maybe from. So the organization was started in 1947. So 1947 to maybe the early 1990s. At which point everything might be available digitally, but we also have runs of government data from around the world, and not so many other places have all in one place many of the things we have, particularly from central banks and finance ministries, things like that. And it's the series that makes it valuable, and it's about the data. And so we were talking about whether it's really our job to hold on to the old things, and I said, actually it is, because it's some of the older material that is actually very interesting. And if we don't have it, we have to make sure somebody else does before we get rid of it. But at some point, it could very well be a historical collection.
And let me say that just because I don't need it doesn't make me say that I don't think it needs to be someplace. And I guess to go back to you can shake your fist at the sky, but it'll still rain. There's a lot of pressure on medical libraries right now to give back the space. It's all online.
Yeah.
What do you need a building for? No, that's not something that we face. And we've been able to sort of take a more methodical kind of, we know this is in the National Library of Medicine. We know it's also the National Dutch Library. We know this is here and there and so forth, and decide how we're getting rid of things. I'm not talking about monographs yet because I can't even think of that. But there still needs to be that material available.
Somebody needs to agree to save it. And someone had told me, I guess I was talking to somebody at OCLC, and they were talking about a program among regional public libraries called The Last Book, and that libraries would collaborate on who would keep what, so that, not everybody needed to keep the bestsellers from 10 years ago, but somebody in the geographical area needed to keep one. And so that if somebody still wanted to borrow it. And the same thing in your area, the same thing, for those of us who have specialized topical collections, we need to work with our we need to collaborate with our fellow libraries, where in our case, sort of wherever they are, so that one of us holds on to some of these things. It's true we don't all need them, particularly as the material gets older. But this is the discussion I've had with people about our spaces. If everybody throws it out at the same time because we're all under the same pressure for space, then we're going to be in trouble. But I think it's our obligation to have that conversation, and to otherwise we're not going to have it.
And there are lots of these different projects going on in lots of different places, and California has some big projects going on. To me, the tough part is making sure that you have the institutional backing to do it. I was in a meeting, and one of the librarians there said, well, I was looking at my collection, I noticed that this was, we were the only libraries that held, there were only 2 other libraries that held this stuff, so I'm keeping it forever, and I put notes in the catalog and so on and so forth. And I thought to myself, well, that's good. What are you going to do when your administration comes in and says, got to go all digital, get rid of all this print stuff? That to me is the hard part, is that there, even with the best goodwill of the library staff, there's still the administration, and that's that working within the institution and building up the understanding, and it can't be one institution.
No.
It has to be some sort of more, regionally or even nationally organized, and it isn't at this point.
And it has to be fair, because if I have to say to my administration, well, we're going to keep these things because, we're only one of 3 libraries that have them, they could say to me, well, what about the other 2? Why aren't they, what are they keeping? And it's difficult when you're not in any kind of a consortium, that there's no legal or governance mechanism to come to those kinds of agreements. And, my administration and your administration have their own priorities that are narrower than this cross-border, cross-topical, collaborative view. And it may be the way we want to operate it, but it's not necessarily our administration's priorities, nor may it be the priority of the administration of the other library that I'm thinking of as the other really good economics collection with whom I'd like to collaborate. But if I don't have any way to do that, and particularly for us, because we're a public sector organization and it's mainly academic libraries who are in some ways our counterparts, and we have nothing in common but our collections.
Yeah.
And in terms of our governance, our kind of organization, our funding, all of those things, and it's a challenging issue.
I think it's a conversation that needs to go on at outside of libraries.
At an association, maybe.
Yeah.
At an association.
Yeah.
Because associations are what kind of bring us together, and we have these conversations, and then we all go back to our organizations.
But they need to be more relevant and not so expensive. $400 to register to go to the conference in Philadelphia is so expensive. Who has that money?
No, I can answer some of those questions.
But let me finish, please, because there are other conferences. I went to one in Arcadia University in Philadelphia, the Library Management Conference. It's $85. It's 2 days. It's not fancy because it's not in the industry of the conference thing. And I think that is what, I'm sorry to be irreverent in your forum. I pay my dues, and I think they are way too high. And they are not addressing our needs. I don't know. Do you think they are addressing your needs? Do you agree with me? I'm the only one?
I think networking in these kind of forums are marvelous. And that's what I so look forward to when I go to national events, if I can afford to.
Right.
And this is terrific.
But it is expensive.
And who do you talk to about how it would serve needs? Are you
With what?
who do you talk to? Who would you talk to about how it could serve needs? Is there a communication? Is there a communication gap? We've been talking about communication in the community. So is there a lack of a way for you to communicate, I need a different kind of educational support?
No, I always communicate to my association my needs, and I always complain about the fees. And the only thing they do, they say, well, we'll give you a discount this time. I'm paying all my librarians association fees, because I think they should be there. But it's very expensive. I have 17. So you calculate how much that is. And what I'm talking about, Mary, is that I go to the conference and they are not addressing my issues. That's all.
Again, I think that's a big concern.
And can I address that? I'm on the board of directors for the Special Libraries Association, and I'd be happy to take these concerns back for everybody in the D.C. area. And the District of Columbia Special Libraries Association is the largest chapter of SLA. The SLA conference, however, is planned.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right. I realize, and it is planned predominantly by the divisions. So the real question, and SLA is a membership organization, so it's not going to change if we don't change it. Because so the real question, you've been a part of the news division. Is the news division not aware of what you're doing and what you need to make sure that news division programming at SLA and other programming related to it is relevant to you, to bring you there and to make it a value. Now, whether or not we can reduce the costs and make it a less expensive conference, goes to a business model question, which I think we definitely need to be looking at in these economic times. And SLA board is looking at business model questions, at the very largest level as well as down in the roots. But I think when you talk about what is relevant, get involved in your division, communicate to the division leadership as to where you want to hear and talk about issues. And I think that there's cross-divisional capabilities as well. But the fact is, the conference is planned by the division leadership. And I've always been confused about the taxonomic structure of SLA. It's like, does the leadership and management division have things that me as a leader should be doing?
We can talk about this offline because it's very personal. And I have done that. I've been an officer in the association as well and all that. They don't address these kind of issues. They are very operational. They are very much like the task-oriented. That is my complaint. If we want to survive, we need to elevate the conversation.
Can I add something from another association? We were finding that the time it took to get for public planning, that it took basically 2 years to get a program out, and by the time that happened, the program was out of date. And looking at ways that you can make that process quicker. Code for Live is really a great example of something that they put together programs. There's like a 2 or 3 month build up, and then they have the meeting. And we were looking at ways to model that and to make it go quicker, so that you didn't have to apply, a year and a half ahead with an idea that is outdated by the time it happened. So maybe looking at that for SLA.
How big is Code for Lib, though? They had to cut it.
Yeah,
they had to limit it. Yeah. But you could do it by division, maybe limit it or divide it up. Yeah. LIDA makes sense.
When I did it, it must have been 2006 or 2007, it was this huge build-up and took months and months, and now they're doing it much quicker.
Yeah.
And ERNL, which is a small resources library conference where I just went to, they accept all the applications, they put it up to a vote, and then there's some oversight as to, let's make sure we touch all these things, and those are discussions that we run there.
Yeah.
I think our chapter is one of the most active ones, and I think you all in the leadership in the SLA in my 4 or 5 years that I've been here, I've been participating quite a bit. I've been extremely active, and I motivate my staff to participate, and I really ask them and encourage them and give them all the time. So that is another role that you as managers have. You need to motivate your staff, and you need to put in your budgets money for professional development. And that is something that we always complain we don't have, but we need to, again, be negotiators and, reach out to our management and make the point. You hire me because you like my skills. Well, in information, we blink and we are out of date. So we need to be in conferences. When you get hired in a new job, just demand that they send you to a conference or that you're going to have a decent budget for your staff. I don't think we're going to make the future if our staff are not trained. We need to give them the tools. Like, you hire new people and they come all with their little wings and they're just ready to fly. You need to really make sure those wings grow and give them the wings and push them up there. The thing is that sometimes you train your staff so much, and then somebody else, they go to another level.
They use those wings.
Yeah. But I think that is your contribution to the field. We have to do that. And for me, training and outreach and professional development, conferences, trips, travel, visiting library, I think you learn so much just in going to your library. To our librarians, they came back totally inspired. Informationists, that's what we have to be called. And you didn't spend anything, just the mileage to go to your library, $30. And that is the kind of thing, and I think the association can promote. The conference is not everything, but you can promote this trip, this visit, that usually we go to the conference, we go to San Diego, and we visit everything. But here, we are lucky. We have all of you. We have all of us. Yeah. If you come to my library, you're going to learn about digitization. I can give you a tour anytime you want to. You belong to public broadcasting. So this is your library. This is, totally, no, that is pledges and all that. But it's true. Tuesdays and Thursday, we have public tours. This building is a destination for Americans. And we tell them, we show them what we are doing. So I think all of you can do that. That's so important. And our librarians, our staff really need that. They need the exposure. And if we have to push them out and motivate them, I feel.
I agree about making visits to other libraries. We learned a lot, and we're getting ready to come down here and see you as well. But yeah, you learn so much from going to somebody else's library and just spending some time and finding out what they're doing and how they're doing it, and it's really enlightening.
Okay. Well, thank you, Pamela and Sue and Laura, for a wonderful evening, and thank you all for coming. I want to point out that our next event will be April 14th, sponsored by the International Relations Committee. I'll get to that, which is an international, in celebration of International Special Librarians Day, and that will be at Georgetown University Law School Library. And there's more information on the chapter event calendar. And Richard also has an event coming up.
Yeah, two actually. I believe DC SLA International Relations Committee is going to co-sponsor a workshop on sister libraries, partnering with libraries from other parts of the world. That'll be April the 2nd, Saturday morning from 10 to 1 at the Southeast Branch Library of the DC Public Library. So it's a DCLA, DCSLA co-sponsored event, and you'll be hearing about it very soon. And the other is I'm giving the public lecture at the U.S. Geological Survey on Wednesday, April the 6th at 7 p.m. If you've never been out to the USGS campus in Reston, Virginia, you're invited out at 7 p.m. that evening to see Treasures of the USGS Library. So it's a 1-hour presentation in our auditorium of some of the most unique and valuable and interesting materials in our collection. So you'll hear more about that on the listserv soon as well.
Thank you for listening to DCSLA Radio. To learn more about our upcoming events or ways to get involved with the chapter, visit our website at units.sla.org/chapter/CDC.